Whether you're a pirate that loves treasure, adventure or combat, this tale will not disappoint. By the end of this story, you'll be asking yourself how you could be this lucky. Now join me, Captain Daddy, as we begin our voyage into the Sea of Thieves. It began as I awoke in a tavern, and upon walking out and trying to talk to people about work, another ship came in and blew mine to smithereens before I'd even stepped foot on it. So I had to put something together, and in time I was finally out on the seas. My first voyage had begun. However, I was hoping to run into that sloop again and show him the business end of my cannons now that I was actually on board. I stopped off at an outpost and collected some cases that needed to be delivered. This was my first real job as a pirate, and I can tell you it will not be my last. As I got closer to the island to deliver the goods, cannons began to fire at me. This shook me, and because I thought it was another pirate, I became flustered and crashed my ship into the rocks. After some mending, I hopped onto dry land and met my first real foe, ghost pirates. They quickly met the wrong end of my rifle, and I carried on to drop off my parcels to a stranded sailor, where I made my first gold on the sea. This is where things started going not so well for now. Back on the sea, I spied another sloop heading in my direction, and although I readied the cannons, they sailed past with no shots fired, and we carried on our way. Until, out of nowhere, an evil ghost ship came to me, all guns blazing. This was my first battle at sea, and I quickly realised how difficult it was managing sails, the helm, cannons and repairs all on my own. But I did not give in. I fired back, and I missed every shot. So I repaired some more and began to work on my aim, eventually blowing holes in their bow. Until finally, I hadn't noticed, but my ship was flooding more than I could handle, and in time, she went down. However, I soon realised that theirs too had sunk, but it appeared for now there was no winners. After once again finding a new ship, I was now sailing with a newfound confidence, knowing that with no experience, I could take one of those on and destroy it, even if it destroyed me in the process. This made me believe that next time I would come out on top, and if you stick around, you'll hear what happened later when I faced a skeleton galleon. But for now, here is where my luck began to shine. In the skies, I saw a cloud shaped as a skull, so I did what any pirate would do, and ran. No, I'm joking. I sailed straight towards it, unaware what I may find. However, before arriving there, I noticed something in the sea. Heaps of treasure were just floating and waiting for me. Chests, gems, and odd-looking skulls of value. I scooped them up and onto my ship, and laid them out, and what a sight it was to behold. I had real treasure, and now was the time to turn away from this skull of clouds, and sell everything I could at the nearest outpost. Once all was sold, I made it back onto the sea and came across an island I decided to explore. Upon arriving, I noticed quickly that this would be a challenge. After finding notes of riddles and captains of old raising from the ground, I fought my way through, uncovering the mysteries of these writings. I ended up with 2 big chests and the skull of these undead captains, which made me a pretty penny at the nearest outpost. Another thing I got from the island was what looked like bounties for these undead captains, so I headed in the direction of one of the shores, and things quickly began to get out of hand. Before arriving at my destination, a megalodon tried to attack me. I sailed quickly away and it continued to chase me, so I took out my gun rather than spinning the boat around and began firing at him. This fellow did not look fazed at my shots, but eventually I reached the shores and the Meg decided to give up the chase. Any survivor of a megalodon attack can call that a win. This island, however, wasn't any less hostile. As soon as I arrived, there were strange monsters and hordes of skeletons, some with explosive barrels, which helped remove lots in one shot. Although waves kept coming, and it was looking unlikely that I would find my bounty, I was soon struck by an unfamiliar sound. Another ship had sailed right up to me without me realising, and luckily for me, they were very friendly. They asked me to join their alliance, so I accepted. Not before trying to blow their brains out, only to realise I had no bullets in my gun. So my first alliance was made, and they sailed away after helping me, and as a first real interaction with other pirates, I was left with a warm heart. I took my treasures from that island and headed for a nearby outpost, only to be met by a skeleton galleon. Not realising this was much bigger than the previous one I had fought, I went straight towards it. This truly was an epic sea battle. I felt like my cannons were hitting their mark. And eventually we got tangled between some rocks. I used this to my advantage, dropping to full sail and getting ahead of the galleon. I turned, blocked off its path, firing more cannons towards the ship and even tossing some firebombs onto their deck, setting it alight. This was it. I felt like I had them. I was firing more and more cannonballs into their starboard and they were looking to be just about ready to sink until, just as this fight was coming to a close, the cowards fled to the bottom of the ocean, and although all the odds were in my favour, I cannot call that a win. So I sailed to the outpost and sold all of my treasures, and that is when I saw it. Another cloud grew in the sky, again like a skull, but this time glowing red. I knew this must have meant something, so I took to the seas and set course for this mysterious event. I finally arrived and the cannons began to fire. I could not seem to prevent this, so I jumped off the ship and headed for the fortress, aiming to take down the cannons. Before I was able to take down the first one, I noticed that I was already too late. My ship had already sunk once again, and now I was stranded at this fort with nothing but my sword and a pistol. I did not give up though. Waves and waves of skeletons, some even made of pure gold it seemed, were piling out of the ground, and no matter how many I shot, slashed or blew up, they kept on coming. Even some captains showed up, but all were doomed to the same fate. However, after a while I felt like this was a lost cause and I would eventually be overrun. To my surprise, by the island there was a little rowboat, which I threw all of my treasure from the fortress onto and made a quick getaway, to which I rowed, and rowed, and rowed, until finally reaching an outpost, where I could sell the loot from the fort and relax. For the last time on this adventure, I found myself a new vessel, ready for my voyage, but after everything I went through, I felt it deserved a nice tankard of grog, followed by a short-lived firework display. But for my first time on the seas, I'd say taking down a skeleton sloop, putting up a commendable fight against the galleon, especially when I was coming out on top, finding hordes of chests and facing off against an evil fortress of the undead, escaping with my treasure and having a close encounter with a megalodon is quite a day for your first time, and I was ready to call it a night. I learned so much on this journey, like how to run a solo sloop, keeping on top of everything whilst maintaining course, and most importantly, how to find treasure. Now if you enjoyed this tale, you can be sure there will be more on this Sea of Thieves, but until then, arrgh!